Size matters for 5 reasons. It matters when we plan our transport routes across Africa, our railways, our roads, the air routes. All of these things are shaped by how we perceive distance. It matters how we plan our trade routes and our trade corridors, how we move goods and services across huge areas. It matters when we think about migration and the movement of people around the continent. But you know the best thing for me? It matters when we consider what lies underneath our feet. The vast reserves of gold, of platinum, of copper, of rare earth minerals. These are the things that are needed to power this green economy. But also it matters because inaccurate tools lead to inaccurate conclusions. Think about climate modeling or security planning. You have to know how big this continent really is. Just another example. United Kingdom, Italy, and Belgium can all fit into Madagascar. In a world where size is often equated with power, misrepresenting Africa's true scale reinforces harmful misconceptions about its geopolitical and economic significance. And this is why we did this. So I run an organization called Africa No Filter. We are a not-for-profit company, and we're trying to change the way the world sees Africa, but more importantly, how Africa sees itself. Every day, I wake up thinking about how we can change the image. The president of your country spoke about having to change the narrative about Africa. And I started thinking about the map, the way the world saw us, the size, and its implications. And I realized that there was a symbolic campaign we could do to actually let people know that we won't tolerate the lie that the world has been fed about us. A little bit about Africa No Filter. We work with storytellers because the only way to change a narrative is to change the stories that feed that narrative. We have a community of over 600 creatives, content creators, filmmakers, visual artists, writers. Their collective reach is 100 million across Africa. We call them our army, and we're waiting to use them to change the narrative. For decades, the world has spoken about Africa's potential, as if it's something in the future. We're always coming soon, like that movie. We're never quite there. But looking at the energy on the ground, that future is now. We're having a moment right now. And it's not an accident. It's the convergence of 3 powerful transformative forces: our young population, digital connectivity, which has democratized knowledge, access, opportunity, and we're adapting to emerging technologies like AI. To tell you quickly, with all of these changes, the way the world sees us hasn't changed. When we first started Africa No Filter, we looked at the narratives and the stories that were told about Africa. The most popular stories that the world sees, and we see about ourselves, are stories of corruption, stories of conflict, poverty, poor leadership, and disease. We did some research, which we announced last year, that showed that the cost of media stereotypes in Africa was $4.2 billion. That's how much it cost us every year in terms of negative stories about the continent. That is enough to educate 12 million children every single year. That figure came about from measuring the risk premium that African countries pay for their debt based on a perception of risk, not the reality. There's a real cost to this negativity. And in our How Africa Covers report, we show that if you're sitting in Togo today, reading about maybe Nigeria or about Kenya, You are reading the same negative content that people in Paris or London or New York are reading. We as Africans don't know each other because the stories we hear about each other are equally negative. There are many reasons why this happens, but if we're working towards one Africa, one voice, we need to change what we know about each other. And the world map, is one example of how we can take back our story. So how did we get here, to the stage where we're living with a 400-year-old lie? For centuries, we've relied on a map projection called the Mercator projection, which was created in 1569. That is 400 plus years old. And it was designed by Europeans at a time when Africa was insignificant. The problem is when you take a round ball, which is the Earth, and you flatten it, there will be some distortions. So regions around the North Pole, like Greenland, they appear much smaller than they are. And Africa, on a map, is actually 15% smaller than it should be. But its projection against the rest of the world. Europe is inflated, America is inflated, Greenland is inflated at our cost. But it's still in use today for two reasons. Because they say it's a good navigational tool. But the sad reason why it's still around is because it's just easier. It's just easier for people to use it. It's everywhere, and we haven't been bothered to make a fuss. That map, the Mercator projection, is a worldview shaped by colonialism. And it was okay at a time. And that map was created over 300 years before the Berlin Conference, which tore up Africa and divided us. But we are still living with the consequences of colonialism, of the Berlin Conference, and sadly, of a map that didn't think we were important. But there are thousands of people that have been trying to solve this problem. And in 2018, 2 Americans and an Australian came up with another projection of the world map called the Equal Earth Map. There are lots of different projections. This is just as Mercator is one. Google came up with the Web Mercator, which is another one that still uses Mercator projection. These are all the different map projections in the world, but the Equal Earth one is the one that most represents the world equally. The campaign was designed, that we created, to raise awareness, and we went through a process over the last 2 years to actually get to the stage where I'll show you some of the results. But we did it in 8 steps. And I'll take you through some of them. First thing is we got partners, because Africa No Filter is a small organization. The African Union is on board, Brand Africa, Speak Up Africa. We had 1 or 2 really influential people, Carlos Lopez, who helped open doors for us. But the most significant one was Esri, who helped us understand about maps and helped us come up with a solution. Because it's enough to say, don't use that map, but what are we asking the world to use? And that's where Esri came in. Well, a couple of things we did. We created a website, so you can go to www.correctthemap.org, and all the tools, all the information is on there. So we created a platform, a place where everybody can go and see the right projection, their tools, their maps you can download. We also decided to start a change.org campaign. There is a place you can go to sign up to say that you also want to see the world map change. So far, we've got about 10,000, that's 9,500 signatures, but there's more. And actually, if there's an ask for you today, it's for you to go and sign this change.org to say that you want to see the world map changed. We've had a lot of publicity, so if you haven't seen it, then maybe we're not doing it in French, but we've had over 900 mentions on traditional media. We did a lot of social media. One of our biggest platforms, CNN, covered it, the BBC covered it, and I love the headlines that they're using. The podcasts on the BBC covered it, the New York Times covered it, and a lot of this is to do with when the African Union came on board. El País in Spain covered it. This station is I'm not sure where it's from, but there was so much publicity and so much coverage. Over 6 million people across the world saw this campaign. As a proportion of the world's population, it's small, but we know there's more we can do. But over 90,000 people engaged with it. I wanted to play this. I don't know if we can. Anyway, it's a film from Dylan Page, who's one of the top TikTokers. He has 2.1 million people following him. And when he put this out, young people started contacting us, asking us about this map, is it true? So there's a lot more we can do, but we had some of the biggest content creators online talking about this. That was a French one. These are some people from our community, how they took the campaign and managed it themselves. Just examples of some of the coverage that we got. And the important thing for us was when the African Union, the deputy chairperson, came on board, did some media interviews and endorsed the campaign, that really took off. And it showed me the power of traditional media. We're towards the end of this campaign, in that we've launched it, we've created some awareness, but there are things we want to do. There are 3 things we want to do. One is we want to institutionalize Equal Earth. And what we mean by that is we want to embed it in all schools, in books, in Google Maps, in all the things that you take for granted where you see a world map. And that requires us contacting individual companies, organizations, publishers, tech companies, and asking them to change the projection. The second thing we want is we want global institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, even the BBC to use the Equal Earth projection. And finally, we want a policy framework to guide countries in Africa to adopt the Equal Earth projection, especially for schools in Africa. Just to give you an idea, these are the kinds of organizations we need to be speaking to. Oxford University Press is one of the largest publishers of textbooks serving Africa. To give you an idea, I put into Gemini, which is Google's AI, and I asked it to draw me a map of Africa. And this is what it drew me. Look at the size of Greenland, look at the size of Africa. It's feeding off the wrong map projection still. So there is work that we need to do. I just want to remind you, before I leave the stage, why it's important to do this work. When Africa is distorted on the map, Africa is diminished in the mind. When Africa is distorted on the map, Africa is diminished in the mind. We're not a small continent. We're not small people. We have the agency. There's enough of us to demand that the world sees us as we are. My one ask of everybody in this room is to sign the petition. You can find it on correctthemap.org. The second thing I will ask you to do is to look at the maps around you, online, in your children's classroom, on your office walls, in the reception of your organizations, and see which projection you're using. And if you see it's the wrong map, say something, change it. Let's challenge the status quo. The third thing I would ask you to do is to mobilize your communities, your family, your friends, your colleagues, and the institution you work for to spread the word. because change begins with us. And if you're a member of government, help advocate for new policies that recognize that accuracy is a matter of dignity, of identity, and proper representation. Imagine if the world used the right map and saw us as we are. And imagine if a world where every child grows up understanding the real size and the real importance and the real truth about Africa. I would ask you to join us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. There's a film I'd like to play.